Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're getting into a really fascinating story about water, about weather, and, about a series of crucial human choices that managed to turn a simple dry spell into an absolute disaster. So here's the big question, right? How does that even happen? How does a perfectly natural dry spell spiral into a crisis that lasts for more than a decade? Well, Australia had to face this head on during an event they called the Big Dry. And the answer? Well, it reveals this powerful and honestly pretty scary chain reaction. Okay, let's get into it. First things first, to really get how this crisis unfolded, we need to set the scene. So, what exactly was the Big Dry and where did it hit the hardest? Yeah, we're not talking about a couple of dry months here. This was a grueling, relentless drought that just dragged on for over 10 years. And it hit right in the heart of Australia's food bowl, a place called the Murray-Darling Basin. So what kicked this whole thing off? What was that first domino to fall? Well, as the title here suggests, it all started with nature's opening move, a simple but very prolonged lack of rain. But as you're about to see, that was just the trigger. Now, this slide is actually super important because it gets at a key difference. The Big Dry started as a meteorological drought, which is just a fancy way of saying less rain was falling. But it very quickly morphed into a hydrological drought, and that means a severe lack of water in the entire system. We're talking rivers, lakes, reservoirs, the whole shebang. And that's right where the story gets really complicated. Okay, so this is the moment. This is where a natural weather event takes a critical turn and becomes a crisis that was really amplified by people. The focus shifts from what's happening in the sky to what's happening on the ground. Think about this. Even as the rains were failing and the rivers were visibly shrinking, the demand for water didn't slow down at all. In fact, enormous amounts of water were still being pulled from the rivers to grow incredibly thirsty crops, things like cotton and rice. And this just lays out the chain reaction perfectly. It's like a line of dominoes. First, nature reduces the rain. Second, humans keep taking huge amounts of water anyway. The consequence? The rivers start to dry up completely. So what happens then? Well, people switch to drilling for water underground, which leads to the final disastrous consequence. The underground water stores start to disappear too. And we're not talking about a minor dip here. This quote really captures just how severe it was. Entire sections of rivers literally just stopped moving. The environmental impact was catastrophic, basically starving wetlands and whole ecosystems of the water they needed to survive. So with the rivers running dry, the search for water went underground. And that decision kicked off the next, and in some ways, even more dangerous phase of this whole crisis. This chart just shows it so clearly, that dramatic shift in where the water was coming from. On the left, you can see the reliance on surface water from the rivers, and it just plummets. Now look at the bar on the right. That's groundwater use. See how it just skyrockets? As the drought got worse, there was this massive, almost desperate pivot from the dwindling rivers to the underground water reserves, the aquifers. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. A lot of this groundwater was what you'd call fossil water. The best way to think about it is like oil. It's a resource that took thousands, even millions of years to build up, and it's just not being replaced. So once you use it, it's gone. For good. It's totally unsustainable. So, and this is the crucial point, it created this vicious cycle. By pumping the aquifers dry, they also stopped the slow, natural seepage of groundwater that actually helps keep rivers flowing in the first place. It's called base flow. So the solution to the drying rivers, pumping groundwater, actually ended up making the rivers even drier in the long run. So after more than a decade of this crisis, what was the big takeaway? What did this incredibly painful experience teach everybody about water and our relationship with it? Well, eventually, the Australian government had to step in with some major policies. They brought in things like water trading schemes, they put heavy restrictions on water use, and they pushed for better efficiency. All of it in a desperate attempt to manage the little water that was left. But the real lesson, the one that really hits home, it goes deeper than government policy. The Big Dry was this stark, unavoidable demonstration of a simple truth. Our own actions can take a bad situation and make it infinitely worse. It just highlighted this incredibly fragile balance between what we demand from the environment and what it can actually provide. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. This whole story took place in Australia, right? But the pressures that caused it, they're universal. A changing climate,
growing populations, a massive demand for resources. It proved, beyond a doubt, how our choices can escalate a natural event into a full-blown crisis. So the real question is, now that we've seen exactly how it can happen, are we prepared to make different choices for the next one?